Inshallah, today we're going to start the fourth episode of the story of Isa alayhi salam. So we've gone through so far, we've seen how Maryam, his mother, was born, and a lot of the story that dealt with her birth. Then we jumped ahead to where Isa alayhi salam is born, and there are a lot of verses about that. From there we went to look at the message of Isa, right? Trying to see what Jesus preached, who he was sent to, and what were the key messages that he preached according to what the Quran tells us. There wasn't a whole lot that the Quran tells us. I think one thing to keep in mind is that the Quran is not necessarily trying to restate every single thing that the past prophets told their people. Right? In general, it tells us that we as Muslims must, and there's no choice about it, we must believe that each of these prophets was God sent, and that each of their messages was the word of the time. Right? They all preach the same beliefs. The law of each of some of these prophets, they differed. Right? There are 5 prophets in particular that would bring a new sharia, a new law. Recite a salawat, please. Focus in a little bit. Right, so what the Quran does compel us to believe in is that in general we have to believe that whatever each of these 124,000 prophets said, 123,999 prophets said before our prophet, they all spoke the truth. Whatever God told them, they spoke. They did exactly what they were meant to do by God. It's not so important that we know exactly what their words were, exactly what their message was. Right? We're not held responsible for Moses' law. We don't have to practice Moses' law now. So there's no point in the Quran quoting and telling us what the law was. And it'll give us examples. It'll say, for instance, they had the law, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Right? It'll tell us that particular law. And it tells us some other laws that the Jews had in the time of Moses. Right? But that's not the point of the Quran. What the Quran is doing, in general, is making us affirm their message and their mission. And secondly, it's giving us certain standards by which we can judge information that we're getting about these prophets. Right? It's a Furqan. The meaning of Furqan is that it's a standard. It's a criterion by which we can judge truth and falsehood. Right? So by explicitly telling us certain things about Jesus, that for instance we never saw evidence in all of his messages to the Bani Israel, to the Jews, we never saw him ever say anything that indicated that I'm God, I'm the Son of God. Right? That's really important for us as Muslims to know that he never said anything like that. In fact, to the contrary, he made absolutely sure, he fulfilled his responsibility by emphasizing the fact that I am a servant of God. Inni Abdullah. His very first words that he spoke was that I am the servant of God. Right? He's very, very adamant to say that God is my Lord and your Lord. Let's all worship him. Right? Constantly restating that, making sure that no one ever has room to legitimately say that he is somehow God or a Godhead and a Son of God, these sorts of things. Right? So that's what the Quran gives us, the standards by which we can now judge and say, when the Bible says that he is the Son of God, that it's wrong. It's wrong because it contradicts the Quran. And like that. So let's see now his message to and his interaction with his companions. Right, so this is going to be the 4th episode in the story, how Jesus interacts with his disciples. And there's several verses in the Quran, maybe about 5 or 6 verses that talk about this topic. Some of them that we'll talk about are from Surah As-Saf, which we just heard recited for us. And the first 2 verses are from Surah Al-Imran, 3:52. فَلَمَّا أَحَسَّ عِيسَى مِنْهُمُ الْكُفْرَ قَالَ مَنْ أَنصَارِي إِلَى اللَّهِ قَالَ الْحَوَارِيُّونَ نَحْنُ أَنصَارُ اللَّهِ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَاشْهَدْ بِأَنَّا مُسْلِمُونَ. And when Jesus sensed their faithlessness, he said, "Who will be my helpers in this path that leads to God?" The disciples said, "We shall be your helpers in this path that leads to God. We believe in God and ask you to testify that we have submitted." Right, so this is the first interaction that the Quran tells us about between Jesus and his disciples. There are a couple of things that are interesting in this verse that I want to share with you. First of all, this phrase that he says, when Jesus sensed their faithlessness, the very beginning of the verse. Right? The them that's being referred to here is the Bani Israel in general, the Israelites in general. Right? He sensed, it became very palpable, that the Jews in general are not going to accept his message. Okay, so when he's referring to the them here, the Jews in general are not going to accept his message. He sensed that they are going to remain kafir. Right? They're going to reject his call to revive the law of Moses and then make some amendments where it's necessary. Okay. So that's who's referred to there, the Israelites. What he does is a very, very sensible thing. Right? He sees that he's not going to be successful in converting and convincing and teaching everyone. Not everyone's going to accept his teaching. So what he does is he says, well, the second best thing to that is to make sure that I have a close cadre of people, right? Some disciples who are extremely gifted in terms of their faith, who are extremely devoted, and who have the aptitude to learn. Let me at least spend my time and my energy with these 12. Right? I can teach them, I can train them, and I can send them out, and at least the word will get out to those people who are willing to learn. But I'm not. He realizes that I'm not going to have success with the vast majority of the Bani Israel, the Israelites. Okay, so that's what he does. I'm going to read. I'm going to share some ahadith with you afterwards about the disciples, so we can know who they are in particular, or some of the qualities about them. Okay, so this is the plan that Isa chooses to do. This is it's sensible. It's a very reasonable thing to do. When you see that you're going to fail, you have a duty and a mission, right? You can't succeed with everyone, but at least start small and see where you can be effective and do that. And this is something that our Prophet did as well, right? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did this. He did this when he got people to make this allegiance to him at what's known as Bay'atul Shajara or Bay'atul Aqaba. Right? He had different instances where he made the people come together and pledge their allegiance to him and to the cause. In some instances, it was very simple. It was simply that we pledged that it was a shahada basically. But in some instances, a little bit later on, he started to ask them to pledge their allegiance to him to defend the Muslims. Right? So it became a war pact as well. That we now pledge our allegiance to support, to fight for this particular cause. If there's any attack on you, then it's an attack on us, and we'll fight as though it's an attack on us, and so forth. And so the Prophet did the same sort of a thing. He emphasized this relationship and got people committed. He also did a similar thing at Ghadir. Right, we just finished commemorating Eid al-Ghadir on the 18th of the Hijjah. So that was another time when the Prophet publicly, right, he anticipated the problems. He had seen evidence of weakness of faith, of ulterior motives, of hypocrisy, and so many things amongst his companions in general. He knew that there were going to be problems. So he wanted to have a very public statement where he let everyone know what the standard was, what they're going to be held responsible for, and he wanted them to basically raise their hand and pledge a commitment to the successor of the Prophet, who was Imam Ali alayhi salam. And he did that very, very effectively. If you go through the conversation, the actual speech of the Prophet, you see that beyond a shadow of a doubt, he made it clear to these people, and they accepted. Right? They raised their hands, and they repeated word for word after the Prophet, stating that we will support Ali and the Imams after him, and very, very explicitly that they knew everything. All 100,000, 120,000, however many people there were, they all said this very explicitly.